This video contains major story and gameplay spoilers for Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare. If you want an unspoiled playthrough, leave now and come back when you've finished it. You have been warned. In 2001, 6 years after the release of the previous game in the series, Alone in the Dark received its first reboot. The New Nightmare came out on the PlayStation, Dreamcast, PC, and Game Boy Color, with a PS2 release a few months later, exclusively in Europe according to Wikipedia. The PC version, which I'll be showcasing, is a port of the Dreamcast version, and has some notable issues with sound quality compared to the original console release, but is nonetheless a solid port. A long opening cutscene establishes the two playable characters making their way to the aptly named Shadow Island, for their own differing reasons, where their plane is attacked and they parachute out, leaving them stranded at different locations on the island. Aline on the roof of the mansion, and Edward Carnby in the woods a bit away from the mansion. It's here that we're given a choice of which character to play as. As Carnby is a default option and appears on the cover, I chose him for my first playthrough. While sharing the name of his counterpart from the original game, this game's Edward Carnby shares few similarities to that of the original, besides fighting monsters and evil forces throughout the game. The player is given time to get familiar with the fixed camera angles and tank controls typical of the survival horror genre around that time, before any combat or action of any sort, but that doesn't mean an absence of spooks. Once you progress far enough, a cutscene plays, showing Carnby radioing Aline and them locating each other through the light of their flashlights. This is the first of many instances where the characters meet up and interact throughout the story, each showing their own complementary halves of the plot, not dissimilar to Resident Evil 2, but without the order in which you play the characters having any impact. Continuing, Carnby encounters a dying man, who warns him of the perils of the island, and dies shortly after Carnby leaves the room, presumably by his own hand. Returning to the room, you'll find your first key of the game, needed for the gate just ahead. Looking in the inventory where you have to go to use any item you pick up, you can optionally indulge in your first lore dump of the game, a book written by Fisk, Carnby's friend and colleague, whose death compelled him to head to the island for answers, which outlined a government organisation strictly tasked with observation, containment, and undermining of small groups of communists and their sympathisers, acting in the United States, which had taken a detour into the occult. Fisk, a member of the Bureau 713, had been tasked with writing a report on Obed Morton, an anthropology professor studying Afghanistan Amerindians, and a man from a powerful and wealthy lineage, by the director Christopher Lamb. In the time afterwards, Lamb, already wildly powerful, began to communicate with Morton regarding his research into the occult, specifically into tablets regarding an apocalypse in which the darkness and evil world he had invoked in his lectures, alongside his proclamations of magical artifacts in his possession, would walk the earth. Something that Fisk suspected Lamb saw as another opportunity to increase his own power beyond his suspiciously powerful governmental role. While as far as I'm aware, it's kind of an insignificant aside here, Fisk does also mention having kept a charm, presumably magical, which he knows nothing about. Something I want to note for later. Something that becomes apparent early on is just how much reading is involved in understanding the fundamental lore of the game, as well as many of its puzzles. The game likes to give much of its lore in one long burst of reading, like this notebook. Besides reading, information is also given via optional radio conversation you can trigger with a button press, which help to flesh out the characters, while also giving hints towards puzzle solutions and directions of where to go next, but are rarely mandatory. The game does a nice job of setting up its monsters in the coming section, where you're shown a cutscene of a dog being attacked by a deformed-looking creature. Heading off the main path, you can encounter a couple of dogs chained to the wall, who, contrary to what you might expect, just run away, showing them as afraid of some worse monster, presumably the one that attacked another dog, and priming you to face off against them on the main path. I would recommend going this way for the extra ammo and medkit. Carnby's route has a large emphasis on action, and with that, a lot of combat from early on, with more dangerous monsters than Aline's route. A bit further down the road, you once again encounter the same shadow monster, referred to in the official guidebook as the Ophthalmicid, preying on a dog, where you have to fight it this time around. Or, you could just run away through the gate, saving both time and ammo to spend on the enemy who appears in the next area. I don't consider the monster encounters all that dangerous, since the game loves giving the player an exorbitant amount of charms of saving. Items used to save the game at any point, which I still had around 60 of left over at the end, so even if you die, you won't be far from your last save. The one issue about saving is that it resets you back to the start of whichever area you're in, including resetting enemies defeated and puzzles you completed since entering the room. Going down into the watery underbelly grants Carnby access to the mansion via its cellar, just having to face off with a crocodile monster known as the Phocomilus in the water, which pops out to attack you every so often, and drags you back from the route forward. Just stand around and shoot it when it appears and you'll be fine. Once in the cellar, you can upgrade from the already impractically modded double-barreled pistol to the triple-barreled shotgun, for more damage against more tanky enemies you'll encounter in the mansion itself, and a more effective tool against the enemies you've faced so far, killing them in 2 shots. Carnby then enters mansion proper via a secret passage and receives a call from Aline, who, having been locked upstairs in a bedroom by Obed Morton, needs Carnby to come and rescue her. Heading upstairs, you can interact with the wardrobe, something highlighted by a sparkle that appears when using the flashlight. This is where I noticed the first major collision issues in the game. You can really need to wiggle the character to interact with stuff, which persists at many points throughout both routes. Now with the entire mansion ahead of him, Carnby's route focuses heavily on exploration and solving puzzles across the mansion in order to unlock new paths. But not before another cutscene, in which Edenshaw, the guardian of the mansion and last remaining witch doctor of the Abganis tribe, introduced himself to Carnby, who pressed him for information on Fisk. Edenshaw, however, replies,
"I do not know who you are talking about. You see, nobody's come to Shadow Island for months now."
Passing through these doors, we're introduced to our next monster type, a towering hybrid with massive jaws taking up the entire front of its torso, which it uses to give the player character a nibble. They're especially useful for acting as meat shields to block the path until killed or wiggled past with the risk of damage, and are used plentifully for just that purpose. Not far from here we can also find the arachnicids, little head crab looking guys who, as you might guess, jump onto the protagonist's head to attack, but don't take much damage to kill. They're used only occasionally, but where there's one there's always more, typically in clusters, making them an annoyance. I'm going to mostly skim over the mansion's puzzle elements in order to avoid spoiling what is, in my opinion, extremely good gameplay, with a wonderfully lively haunted house. Many elements interconnect, creating a web of puzzles and exploration, which drive you deeper into its recesses in order to escape. Throughout, the story of the Mortons unravels, telling a story of an obsession with the world of darkness and the powers within, spearheaded by Alan Morton and his continuation of the experimentation and bloodshed started by his older relatives. Solving puzzles more often than not provides keys, which present an issue in and of themselves, especially for non-European players, in the floor numbering on the keys themselves. While the map uses the American floor numbering system of 1st, 2nd and the attic as a 3rd floor, the keys use the European method of ground floor, 1st floor and then the attic as a 2nd floor. I found this kinda confusing until a bit of the way through, making locating the doors I needed to unlock difficult. In universe, I suppose this could be explained by the Morton family originally immigrating to the US from England, but more likely, in my opinion, this is probably a mistake made in translation or localization, since the devs are French, so we'd use a European floor numbering system. Each route has their own exclusive boss fights, the first I encountered being the Procuraptor. It's not that difficult, but make sure you time your attacks right as it attacks, and have enough ammo to take it down. The box of rockets you can find on the stairs should help. After solving all the puzzles, Carnby is finally able to unlock the front door and gate, where the game really leans into its action focus for Carnby's side, with a long onslaught of ophthalmicids and a lot of hybrids. It's here where the selection of weapons gets a spotlight. Mainly the shotgun, which has plentiful ammo and is useful for pretty much the entire game, the grenade launcher, which has little ammo on Carnby's run so should be used sparingly, mainly for clusters of annoying little enemies, the rocket launcher, which deals nice damage and has a comfortable amount of ammo, and finally the plasma cannon, which while it deals nice and continuous damage, only does so at a very short range. Moving outside of familiar ground, we meet the Lux Rat, which moves fast and dies equally as quick. I found it easiest to just run past them and not waste time, with how little of a threat they are. Moving on to the moor, where Carnby begins a ritual with instructions from Aline over the radio. and a recording of Edenshaw found early on in the mansion, which I had to listen to multiple times to get the words noted down to recite at Stella, which I found a bit of annoyance, since I couldn't seem to skip past the rest of the recording to only listen to the bit I needed. The ritual summons an Abcanis statue, one of 7 required for a ritual required to seal the darkness, and the second one obtained in this route, and a circular stone stele, which he traced with Aline for a ring with Obed Morton's seal. During the journey there, we meet yet another enemy, the Night Ripper, which is easy to handle with a plasma cannon with how slowly it moves. In the swamp we can find the wreckage of the plane, with a couple of items, one of which is needed for a later puzzle. The pilot also remains on the plane, being injured and trapped as it sinks down to the drink. A quite frankly harrowing death. Using the item from the plane, sigils written in blood become visible, which I found to be a neat hunt for clues that gets you to observe and interact with the backgrounds around you. These sigils then open the way into a secret passage, where the seal comes into use to grant entry to an underground lab. Carnby then comes face to face with Alan Morton dissecting a shadow creature and taking verbal notes he's no doubt using for his human experiments. After realising his company, Alan makes a run for it, leaving Carnby trapped in the lab until he overloads the electricity to escape and follow after. This section has some nice jump-scare monster attacks which will take a good old chunk out your health if you're not careful. A new path has opened up in the cellar from Aline's actions, allowing entry to the greenhouse, with a new enemy encounter in the form of the Photosaurus, which has some neat mechanics the game doesn't really get to show off until Aline's route. Here you just need to push a statue thing off a platform, which, trust me, you can do, despite the janky collision doing its best to make me think otherwise. Doing so gives a third statue for the ritual, and another ring with a seal, this time of Alan Morton, which grants access to the world of darkness. Here, Carnby and Aline meet back up once again, and we receive a translation of a tablet telling the fate that awaits the Earth should we fail in our quest, of the darkness spreading across the world at dawn, and enveloping and consuming all creatures of light. Continuing down the passage, make sure you pick up the items from under the hatch, as there's no returning back here once you go forward. A cutscene plays in which, despite Edenshaw's words, and both Aline and Carnby having guns they could very easily use to kill him, Alan opens up the gates sealing the darkness. Carnby is sucked through the gates and lives by virtue of divine protection. What follows is an onslaught of constant monsters as you explore the Giga-esque world of horror, now armed with a new lightning gun that shoots a continuous beam of energy at foes and can spread out to nearby enemies too. Not only is it powerful, but it also has an endless supply of ammo in this area, with crystals that restore its battery reloader. This area feels fittingly otherworldly and alien, and often has wrong turns you can take if you don't check the map to see where you are. Continuing deeper, you'll come across a cavern where the corpse of Archibald Morton lies, great-grandfather to Obed and Alan, and along with his son Richard, creator of the weapons and ammo used against the darkness. We take his belongings, since he clearly doesn't need them anymore, flasks and a photoelectric pulsar, a powerful weapon drawing from the same supply of power as a lightning gun, that must be charged before firing. I rarely used it because of its charging time, but it would be useful if I didn't have a supply of rockets and shells saved from earlier in the game. The game's hardly stingy with ammo, and includes these backup weapons with an infinite supply of ammo, just in case you somehow manage to run out. Something I have to say I appreciate at the end of a multiple hours long game, since I wouldn't have to play all of it over again. Using a dangling rope, which is kinda hard to spot, Carnby descends further to chase after Alan, who once cornered begins monologuing about how they're too late and all that, only to be interrupted.
Look! Look what you did to your brother!
Obed? But...
Without the context of Aline's route, this comes slightly out of left field, with only journal entries about Alan's human experimentations on his father, fusing him with creatures of the darkness. The chase begins again, deeper into the otherworldly catacombs, where Carnby suddenly gets a radio call from Johnson, the man who urged him to journey to the island in the first place, revealing that he was undercover at Lamb's Bureau 713, and that Fisk, the man whose death drew Carnby to the island, had never even been able to set foot on it, before being killed by Lamb for knowing too much. Johnson now, helping out, sends a helicopter to pick up Carnby and Aline, giving a convenient escape. Even further into the depth, the ground is now partially molten, certainly a hostile environment that thankfully doesn't deal damage, leading into Abcanis ruins, where a felled pillar leads to a small pool of healing water, which we can fill our flask taken from Archibald's corpse with for even more healing items. Needing the head of a statue to open a pair of ancient doors, the hunt for the statue leads to this route's final boss, and the main villain of the story, and now mutated and monstrous, Alan Morton. I found the rocket launcher to be particularly useful here, but not without issues. All weapons seem to have collision issues in this area, getting caught on bits of the environment and not hitting their intended target. Or just straight up going through him. The auto-aim being a bit patchy was an annoyance for most of the game, particularly useless on steps, but really becomes evident here. Kite Alan around the arena, shooting regularly to whittle him down, and he should sink to his knees. This is not the end of the encounter, but rather an opportunity to get the item needed to kill him, which would probably work better if it were more clear that it was even there to begin with. If you look at the map, you can see an alcove, which you might, like me, miss in the middle of a boss fight. It took a quite frankly embarrassing amount of time for me to notice, having downed the boss several times before realising what to do. Downing him one last time, we can make for the spear, where Carnby would otherwise be chucked out of by Alan, and grab the spear, granting Carnby with the Spirit Halloween Native American costume, which is, aha. It's really goofy, especially with his glowing silhouette T-posing during the outfit change. I don't know why the devs decided to do this, it's so out of the blue. I guess it might be because he's chosen by the gods of light, but it's certainly weird and culturally insensitive. Nevertheless, Carnby stabs Alan with a spear, killing him at long last, and transforms back. Now, he can grab the statuette and return, with Aline bringing the last head needed to open the door. Now, in a cutscene, Carnby hands over the final statue to Edenshaw, who stays to fulfill his destiny, while Carnby and Aline escape via helicopter. The island erupts in light as Edenshaw puts a stop to the darkness there, once and for all. While this is very obviously supernatural, Lamb does his best to cover it up, paying a geologist to claim it was a result of tectonic fault lines. This last shot does some work to hint at a sequel that never came, focusing on Lamb as a primary antagonist. That's the ending, but we're only halfway through the game, with Aline's route taking a completely different and complementary path. While Carnby's focuses more on the Morton family history of having bought the island, performed human sacrifices, and trying to unleash the forces of darkness, Aline's has a different focus. I'm back with a mug of tea, so let's get into the second half of the whole. An ethnology professor, studying the Abcanis people and language, Aline has a much larger focus on the history and mythology of the island than Carnby. She also has much less of a focus on action, which becomes apparent from the very start, with her lack of any weapon, only having a flashlight to defend herself. Having landed on the roof, she checks in with Carnby before entering through a window into the attic, going into a bedroom with an exorbitant amount of candles. Laid on the bed is Lucy Morton, mother to Alan and Obed, who warns Aline about the living shadows of the island, and tells her that light dispels the shadows, which explains why her room is so well lit despite her being blind. While Lucy meets Carnby briefly for his own route, she doesn't gain much importance until Aline's. Aline is given a key, and before leaving, has her first monster encounter with the Phocomelus, which establishes her primary tool to keep monsters at bay for the early section of the game, the flashlight. On her way down from the attic, Aline's route highlights the Photosaurus' weakness to light, something that you can use to keep them back, and, by using light switches, entirely dispatch them. I like this, it gives a new dimension to combat, i.e., don't. Behind a closed door, Aline listens into a conversation between Alan and Obed, in which Alan threatens Obed, which, having seen what happened to Obed at the end of Carnby's route, is something he'll definitely follow through with. Using the key, Aline gets her hands on a pistol, and is put into an encounter with an ophthalmicid. In just the next room, one of the Morton brothers runs away down the corridor. Aline follows, wanting to seek answers, with her primary reason for going to the island being because she believes Obed to be her father, with a photo of her mother and Obed in her inventory for the entire game as her proof. Continuing to follow him, Aline confronts Alan instead, try and talk to him, and he shoots her with a tranq. She has a nightmare about not knowing who her father is, and wakes up in the bedroom, where Carnby freed her from in this route. She, not knowing the existence of Alan, just assumes him to be Obed. Carnby isn't here just yet, so Aline heads down into a secret passage behind a mirror, where she once again spies on the Morton brothers.
Lamb? Is that you? Don't overdo it. Did you receive the documents? Stop it. You sound like Alan. You have no idea what is going on here. 2 agents will never stand a chance. What we need is the entire army. You're a downright bastard. Come get me out of here right now. Lamb? Lamb! No, don't do it. Let me explain.
Heading back up after this, Aline meets with Carnby and is given a leg up through a trapdoor into the attic, where she encounters a haunted mirror who makes a misogynistic comment and then strikes up a deal with her, to deliver another mirror to him, Deserto, which was previously confiscated by Edenshaw. And in exchange, he will tell her who her father is. If you're thinking this sounds like a deal with the devil, you'd be right. Lucy warns of his evil and trickery, and documents we picked up tell us that the Mortons made a deal with him across generations, which didn't work out great for them in the end. You can enter into a mirror elsewhere in the house, where you're asked whether you want to hand over the mirror. Choose wisely, because one option will immediately kill you, sending you back to your previous save. The cursor is on the yes option by default, so be careful not to spam through it. After defeating Deserto, Aline is congratulated by Edenshaw, who explains that he knows a ritual, passed down by his forefathers, they must perform that night to stop the shadows, requesting that she gather the 7 statues of the gods of light. After Aline turns away, he disappears, like a ghost. While Deserto has significant influence in the backstory of the game, I feel he's underutilised as a villain in the actual playable story. Ideally, I would have liked to see more done with him as a character, and with the ability to go into mirrors, which is a brilliant concept and could recontextualise much of the mansion's environments. Exploring the mansion now, it becomes evident just how empty it feels as Aline, with little to interact with compared to Carnby's route. It's probably the weakest location in her playthrough, since it just feels like wasted space for you to get lost in. In this route's favour, the way forward is indicated thematically, with mirrors being a running theme throughout Aline's time in the mansion. Breaking a mirror reveals a book addressed to a witch doctor, who we can presume to be Edenshaw, outlining a ritual to open the gate to the darkness. It's a small error, but I find it kind of fitting that this book misspells the word lightning as lightening. I guess it was unintentional, given that it's preceded by the phrase, like spears, like. But it's such a common mistake that I can't blame them. Shout out to my homies in the Danny Phantom fandom who kept, and keep using, this misspelling to the point where it's become a bit of a meme. After reading the book, the painting on the wall showing a ring of stone stellas switches to show a shaman casting an incantation, which I think is a fun detail. It's very haunted house-like. Much to my relief, with the amount of running around the place I did trying to figure out what to do, Aline immediately teleported back to Lucy's room after leaving the study, which does something to lighten the frustration of fetch questing. Aline confronts Lucy about not telling her that she had another son, to which Lucy says,
Alan, that horrid beast is my son no longer.
Which is kinda understandable given all the shit he's done. Aline's given a prism, which I was kinda baffled on what to do with it, but it turns out you have to put in a projector, along with your flashlight, which wouldn't be an issue if the game actually indicated that you can interact with the projector like it does with other objects in the scene. I walked around the place cluelessly until looking up a guide. The game's otherwise pretty good about highlighting interactable objects, so it's a bit of a weird exception in my opinion. In hindsight, it's easy to spot, so I shouldn't have had that much trouble, but I will die on this hill. Doing this plays a recording of one of Alan's experiments, and I'm going to say now to look away if you have a fear of needles. Here, Alan injects his father's corpse's darkness, and declares him as being born again as a new man. The projection ends, and you're good to look back now, revealing a cube with a code to the next puzzle in this route's very linear order. Plug the code into a shelf in the library, the doors to which were unlocked by Carnby in his own route, while we were elsewhere in the mansion, to get access to a secret hidey hole. This code is the same across saves, so you don't even need to use a projector if you know it ahead of time. Prepare yourself and pop a save here, because a boss fight is incoming as soon as you flip the switch. Behold, the Elder Hybrid, also known as Howard Morton. Kite him around and shoot him till he collapses. I died on my first try, and didn't bother going to the projector again, so that glass prism is just going to be sitting in my inventory for the rest of the playthrough. Picking up half of a medallion after the fight, we once again return directly to Lucy, who gives Aline the other half, which we can use to get out. Aline asks Lucy if Obed had a daughter, and is informed that he is married to his work. Leaving, we see that the Elder Hybrid has come back to life, setting him up to be a reoccurring threat similar to Resident Evil's Mr. X. We leave through the same route that we used to enter the mansion in Carnby's run. The cellar is pretty barren for Aline, leaving the only way forward is a greenhouse, and then the fort. The route to the fort goes through a graveyard, where we have our second encounter with the Elder Hybrid, where we once again have to defeat him before being able to progress. By this point in the run, Aline's route is more combat focused than it was early on, with her having access to a large amount of grenades and rockets, which make quick work of most enemies. While the game's description on GOG claims Aline's route to be more puzzle-focused than Carnby's, I honestly found the opposite, with her having less puzzles and, well, less everything compared to Carnby's route. I found her route easier in both terms of puzzles and enemy encounters, and this isn't just a result of me playing her route second. Once in the Morton family tomb, we have to use a torch to shine a pattern, which presents a new quirk that I only encountered here, of having to use a mouse to aim. For the rest of the game, I was playing keyboard only, so it was kinda surprising that they even included precise aiming, especially since it has no actual use outside of this specific instance. Doing this puzzle grants us access to the fort, which we enter by climbing up vines on its outer wall. The game's manual claims that unlike Carnby, Aline can scale certain parts of the environment, and thus reach new exploration zones, but outside of these vines and one rock face in the late game, her climbing ladders and stone slabs is no different to what Carnby does in his own route. Heading lower down to the fort's ground floor, Aline meets the imprisoned Obed, who is a bit pessimistic.
Nothing can save us from the darkness now. You too should prepare to die. Night is falling all over the world. It has slipped its cold hand into my brain.
Aline tries asking him if he knows her mother, but he's not really with it, and keeps talking like he's about to die. Or, more accurately, undergo a transformation into a hybrid monstrosity. At long last, she asks him directly if he's her father. And he laughs. Yeah, this man has never held the company of a woman in his life. Obed doesn't talk much more, so we just collect the items in his cell, and leave him to his fate. You can actually see Obed in his cell briefly in Carnby's route, before Aline makes it to the fort, while looking through a telescope. It's brief, but it's another neat instance of how the two routes link in with each other. Like with Carnby's time in the mansion, I'm going to gloss over much of Aline's time in the fort to avoid spoiling what is, in my opinion, the highlight of her route. Here we have many more enemy encounters than before, and have to piece together a perforator device from parts scattered across the map to blast open the way forward. I also managed to get out of bounds while exploring, for the second video in a row, which I feel calls for a counter. This time I had to reload my save to get back in bounds, but with how much you can save it isn't a big deal. Hey, in editing here, I don't actually think I went out of bounds here. I think I just had the camera get locked, which is sort of out of bounds adjacent, but I'm not adding to the counter for this instance. I had a good time here exploring the fort, much like I did with the mansion, and here, Aline's route feels much less linear than it did earlier, much to its benefit. Heading into the planetarium, Aline receives a call from Carnby, who has reached the circle of stone stellars, and we now have to figure out which way he needs to face to do the incantation. Calling him again gives us some dialogue, as during Carnby's route, where he's asked to go to specific stellars and read out how many marks there are. Have a pencil and paper handy, because this dialogue is not repeatable without reloading your save. I think this is an annoying way to go about it, and requires that you not only pay attention, but be in an environment, and with good enough hearing, to where you can get all the dialogue without issue. I don't know how Aline figures out the order of the stellars. I would appreciate if you could please comment down if you do know what the hell the logic is. but what matters is that you write down the numbers in order to get the date you input, the day the game takes place on. Doing so causes the planets to align, giving us our answer to relay back to Carnby. I had to go through this again after saving and quitting for the evening, since doing so reset my progress back to when I first entered the room, which is kinda annoying. Picking up the ring with a seal, Aline heads over to trade it for the stone steel with Carnby. On the way over, we're once again ambushed by the Elder Hybrid, but it's really easy to just run away, so don't waste time on ammo here. Steel acquired, we're teleported back over to where we need to use it, on this odd monument, giving the third statue of Aline's route, as well as a piece needed for the overarching objective here. Heading back to Obed's cell later on in Aline's time in the fort, we'll have you find it empty. It seems something has happened to Obed, which we'll see later. Getting the final piece ready for the perforator device gives us a final confrontation with the Elder Hybrid, where, like previous encounters, no amount of damage from our weapons can kill him. Thankfully for us, this room has just about the highest ordnance weapon we could possibly want. The might of Zeus himself, lightning. Run around in circles until the boss jumps into the middle of the room 3 times. It's pretty easy and just a matter of hoping the AI will do what you want. With Howard Morton now allowed to rest, we can continue with the main objective of the fort. You can't charge your energy source directly from the lightning in this room, so it's time to become a speedrunner and make it all the way back down to the completed perforator in under 2 minutes. The game throws a bunch of enemies at you to block your path, but just run past and you shouldn't have a problem. Blasting open the path, the game throws a whopping 1 singular Night Ripper at you. And we can now meet up with Carnby on our way into the world of darkness. Same as before, Alan opens the gate to the darkness, and Carnby gets pulled through, while Aline stays back with Edenshaw, who reassures her that Carnby isn't dead, and sends her onward. While Aline's journey through the world of darkness reuses many aspects from Carnby's, including access to a lightning gun and photoelectric pulsar, Aline leads her into a Nabcanis temple, where we find out about the gods of light. Travelling across the stars, the gods of light sought a haven of rest, and enamoured by Earth's beauty, chose to settle down there. However, back then, the Earth was inhabited by the creatures of darkness. The gods of light, who we're led to believe are the good guys, decided to fight them. Heracles, the god of starlight, represented by a bull, attacked first with his lightning. Anticolt, the god of original light, represented by a bison, sent sheaves of multicoloured light from his golden shield, pushing the creatures of darkness into dark forests. Urphenos, the god of light of fear, represented by a bear, then shot over 10,000 arrows like dazzling sunbeams into the forest, where the shadows had retreated, pushing them further into the mountain caves. Heliopanna, the god of radiance, represented by a fish, then went fully scorched earth, and pitched 1,000 suns to burn in the earth's sky, evaporating the oceans, and forcing the creatures of darkness down from the mountains to beneath the shade of trees on the plains. Heliopanir then extinguished his suns, and it would then rain for 1,000 years. Gilgamesh, the god of sovereign light, represented by a snake, melted his silver lance in the heart of the sun, which then fell to earth and filled every recess with light, forcing the creatures of darkness deeper into the abyss. Melacanth, the god of blinding light, represented by a horse, took up his golden sword to spread further terror among the creatures of darkness, who took refuge beneath the earth's crust, where they hide in the present. Finally, the gods grew tired of fighting, and Hecatoncheires, the leader of the gods, and god of life-bringing light, created humanity as a race of guardians to ensure that the creatures of darkness would never escape their prison. The gods, at last, left to continue their journey through the stars. Radioing Carnby at this point gives us some nice characterization, and fleshes out the relationship between the protagonists some more. They feel like genuine people, with the start of a potential romantic relationship coming from their camaraderie and being thrust into a nightmarish scenario that they, Aline specifically, have struggled to deal with. Completing the puzzles here, Hecatoncheires himself speaks to Aline directly, praising her and wishing her well for her upcoming battles. I managed to get out of bounds again while figuring out where to go, with these dogs running into a rock face I had to climb down from, pushing me out of bounds. This could have been avoided if I could have shot the dogs from the higher ledge, but the poor attack lock-on wouldn't let me. Reloading my save and continuing onwards, Aline and Carnby confront Alan, who is brought down further by Obed, now fully mutated into a monster of darkness. Aline follows after and picks up the final statue needed for Edenshaw to put an end to this once and for all. We're nearing the end here, and Aline gets her own call from Johnson. She's, unsurprisingly, not a fan of the guy after he tricked her into going to the island in the first place. Johnson confesses that Lamb wanted to get rid of her and Carnby, as they're the only two who might get in his way, getting him to present her with a doctored image of Obed and her mother together to trick her. After Aline wades through Phocomelis-infested waters, she gets another call from Johnson, who reveals that Lamb has locations of 2 other gates of darkness, setting up potential sequels. This cutscene also has the fun effect of not pausing the monsters on the ground below the ledge, meaning that they can get nice and close to attack you the moment you jump down. If only I could aim down at enemies below me. And finally, we reach our final boss. Standing opposite on a fallen plinth is a mutated Obed, whose monstrous side taunts her with the idea that he might be her father, while his human remains cry out for her to shoot him. He moves slowly forward along the plinth, but can be reset back to the starting ledge by just heading back to the opposite side. Figuring the game might want me to avoid conflict for some reason, I don't know. After much trial and error and clipping into the floor, managed to wriggle past him to the exit, where Aline and Carnby escape. This, however, is not the intended way to do the boss fight. Using your arsenal of weapons and plentiful ammo you should have, assuming you have some ammo management, hit him with everything you have. The auto-aim is, once again, a bit funky, so you have to time your shots just as Aline snaps onto him with her gun. While there's no indicator of how much damage you've dealt, hitting the end of his health bar prompts a cutscene where, now the shadows are weakened enough, Obed's human self is able to rescue Aline from falling and hold back the horde of enemies, sacrificing himself in the process. I find this to be a much easier and more satisfying end than my initial strategy of just running past him, and gives him a conclusion to his character and relationship to Aline. After all that, Aline gives Johnson a well-deserved slap while they leave. While it's never shown directly, we can pretty comfortably assume that Lucy and Edenshaw died in the eruption. Aline's path is much shorter than Carnby's, but I don't think this is entirely a bad thing, ensuring that it doesn't outstay its welcome. The two halves of the story are pleasantly different and mesh well together to create a whole, in terms of both lore and gameplay. While the game is far from perfect, with many issues I've outlined over this video, I think it's seriously underrated. You may be wondering where it goes from here. After all, the game alludes to a sequel, but this story would never see anything of the sort. With the 2008 reboot of the franchise, the new nightmare was completely retconned out of the lore. There is, however, more to cover. While the majority of ports don't have enough difference between them to warrant another playthrough, the Game Boy Color version of the game is entirely different. Developed by Pocket Studios, this version of the game is less of a port and more of a sister game. The game is much smaller than other versions, with entire areas missing or changed, including Aline's entire route. Cutscenes are all depicted with still images and text, but that's to be expected given the lack of storage space on the Game Boy cartridge. While I have a physical copy of the game, I'm going to mostly be using emulator footage, so you don't have to deal with a phone recording of my GBA. Like in the PC and home console versions, Carnby heads to Shadow Island to investigate Fisk's murder. In this version, Charles Fisk has been working a case for Aline to recover a stolen statuette from the island, giving us a setup for the story, without half as much backstory and context as the original. Aline pilots a plane over to the island and explains that the statuette belongs to the lost Abkhanis tribe and is believed to hold great power by the tribe, Aline, and the man who stole it, Alan Morton. The plane this time lands by the island without issue, and Carnby heads off on his own into the island, while Aline remains in the plane to allow for a quick getaway. The fixed camera perspectives remain from the original version, using the same environments, but compressed and in some cases new renders altogether. This overworld contrasts with the more simple environmental art of the monster encounters, and with Carnby's own sprites, which are especially simple, with block colours, a design decision that makes sense with how his sprites are shrunken and enlarged to create the impression of depth. Unlike the original version, this game doesn't have tank controls, instead just moving Carnby in the direction pressed on the D-pad, something that can cause trouble with going back the way you came should you hold down the direction for too long, but overall controls pretty smoothly. The game explains its mechanics quite clearly, telling the player the controls explicitly for interaction. Items on the ground are very visible, as are many interactable objects in the environments, but not all. Some doors can be hard to make out, especially on the original Game Boy Color display. Heading toward the mansion, we find our first combat encounters. These encounters are all scripted, not random, occurring when you step in a specific location, and many have ammo lying on the ground, that I recommend prioritising picking up a lot of, since the game has quite limited resources you'll want to conserve. Enemy sprites are well done and distinct from each other. The enemy's behaviour, on the other hand, is basic, and the same across different types, with the only differences being movement speed and attack damage. Key items are able to be selected from the inventory screen, then used on objects once selected. While it's mostly linear and just picking up an object to immediately use it, there are exceptions that I'll cover later on. In the mansion, the mirror that served as a secret door in the original game now houses Fisk's ghost, who wants Carnby to bring his amulet to him from elsewhere in the mansion. Fisk takes on the role as the main method of instructing the player of where to go. His being in a mirror is a reflection, pun intended, of Deserto in the original, except, not evil, and an example of how the two routes were sort of smushed together into something new for this game. Now, that amulet, do you remember 40 minutes ago when I mentioned a magical charm from Fisk's journal? I don't blame you if you don't, it's been a while. Well, there's another link. I don't know how intentional it was, but I doubt it'd be mentioned for no reason, right? While the events have to be done linearly, right down to specific key items and journal entries picked up, the way to the amulet is surprisingly out of the way, requiring multiple steps to get to. It's not very clear where you're meant to go at first, but the route can be found pretty easily, if with a little tedium, by trial and error. Now's a good time to mention that not all combat encounters are required, and half of them are in optional areas with nothing but the enemies, just wasting your health and ammo, which are in painfully short supply should you stumble into too many of these. One prominent offender here is the centre of the library, which is only there to punish players looking to take a shortcut across it. Aline is MIA at this point, having been overwhelmed by massive spiders, like the ones we've been fighting, leaving Fisk as our only guide. Returning the amulet to him, he will now talk to us anywhere. Head to the attic and grab the missing part of the shotgun that we grabbed while exploring earlier, which has been removed by Alan after his employees tried to use the guns to fight against his hordes of spiders, among other monsters. In this game, instead of the World of Darkness or any of its associated mythology, the monsters are all described as simply being from the underworld, summoned by Alan using the statuette's power. The shotgun deals more damage than the starting pistol, but has such a slower fire rate as to make it the worst option a lot of the time. But the additional ammo is better than nothing. Continuing down into the cellar, one of the backgrounds from the crypt is used here for a bit of an abstract but easy puzzle, provided you explore carefully. Down in the sewer you have to tread carefully since these tentacle things damage you on touch. This section also has an instant kill should you touch this massive worm, with a unique death screen. This underground passage leads out into the Circle of Stone Stella, where the game's first encounter with the monstrous Alan Morton, corrupted by the power of the statuette, occurs. He teleports around after attacking, and can pretty easily deal a good amount of damage. Alan leaves once he reaches half health, presumably to recover before your next encounter with him. With the amount of damage he'll take here, now's probably a good time to mention the oddity of medkits being replaced with potions, each of which restores a different amount of health, ranging from 10 to 30 depending on its colour. Like ammo, these are finite and must be rationed out across your playthrough. Surprisingly, Carnby next heads into the fort. There's a key to the left, so that should be easy enough. This is a red herring and just results in you having to deal with an extra enemy encounter. Much earlier in the game, you pick up these gardening gloves alongside the crowbar used to get into the mansion. Using these, you can scale the vines up the side of the fort, much like Aline does. Continuing through the fort, you get to the secret lab, and contrary to the PC and home console version, the game has you turn off the power to get through, by blowing up a non-highlighted fuse box, which can be a bit hard to spot but is there. The gardening gloves come in handy again to destroy the backup generator, and you are good to go. The game gives you plenty of hints of what to do here by telling you outright that you can't touch it with your bare hands. Make sure you grab the crossbow from the entrance to the lab if you haven't already. Something that can be a little hard to spot in the wrong lighting. It's not essential, but it will definitely help out, dealing more damage than the pistol with a similarly fast fire rate. Like in the original, the underground lab leads into the world of darkness, or I guess the underworld in this version. The crowbar gets used twice in this section on this stone, which is clearly signposted, and this pillar, which is near impossible to know to interact with until you do. Where doing so without an item gives a message that there's an indent in the rock, a message that is absent from the other pillars, and hints to the player that you need to use an item here. I can't complain too much, since the game does give you clues on what to do. The spring, instead of healing you at all, teleports Carnby over to a different section of the underworld, where you can immediately get lost. With a series of crossroads you can only figure out the way forward through by trial and error, so I'm going to give you the answer. Up left, down left. It's not that long of a sequence, and just sends you back to the start if you pick the wrong route, but I still think it's poor design, made just to waste the player's time. Regardless, going through the maze gives you a blue gemstone that lights the way forward. Discovering a statuette at last, it's trapped behind a force field, so we'll have to deal with that, by going down one of 3 routes. One leads you to a monster encounter, the second to a potion, and the third to a great big glowing statue that appears to be glaring down at you. Blow it up with the dynamite picked up before the maze, lighting the fuse with a lighter that's been sitting in the second slot of your inventory the entire game. Leave the room, and head back to the statuette. Returning to the big statue before it explodes will result in an instant game over from getting caught up in the explosion. So, don't do that for obvious reasons. The ugly statuette teleports you back to the mansion, where you can heal up and grab any ammo you have left around the place in preparation for what's to come. Once out of the mansion, hope to God you have enough ammo, because here's the final confrontation. Should you run out of ammo, you'll die, as I did in my first playthrough attempt, having to restart the game from the very start to conserve enough for the end. This game is definitely more strict on resource management than the original, making it significantly more difficult, but it is also much shorter, taking me under an hour to replay. The fight against Alan Morton is the same as the first encounter with him, but with a larger health bar. If you spam the fire button when he's approaching, the fight barely takes any time. I find the pistol and crossbow especially useful here, thanks to their fast fire rate. With Alan Morton dead, Fisk can now rest in peace, avenged by his friend. Carnby leaves as the sunlight rising in the horizon drives the monsters away. Alas, the statuette we went out to collect was destroyed in the fight with Alan, but the gemstone we picked up earlier is just as good. And now, that's the end. The Game Boy Color version is pretty good in my opinion despite its short length. The difficulty is both understandable and enjoyable given its short playtime. The game also has unlimited saves, so you can absolutely save scumming your way through the game if you need. I only actually found out about this game by just stumbling across it on eBay a while back, while beefing up my Game Boy game collection, around the time the recent Alone in the Dark remake came out, and figured, why the hell not? And I'm glad for it. These are the only Alone in the Dark games I've played so far, but if I reach 5k subs I plan on reviewing the first 3 in one go, so make sure to subscribe if you're not already. And hey, why not like the video and comment while you're at it? Goes a long way. See you around.